12. Wives, likewise, be submissive to your own husbands, that even if some do not obey the word, they, that is the husbands, without a word may be won by the conduct of their wives. So wives preach powerful sermons with their conduct. They're not to be naggy, bossy, critical, pushy with their words, but their conduct can win a husband over. When they, that is the husbands, observe your chaste conduct accompanied by fear, godly fear. Do not let your adornment be merely outward, arranging the hair, wearing gold, putting on fine apparel. Rather, let it be the hidden person of the heart. So women are to adorn primarily, first of all, dress your heart. Adorn your heart with attractive things. And what are those? Well, it's beautiful things. But the incorruptible beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is very precious in the sight of God. For in this manner, in former times, the holy women who trusted in God also adorned themselves, being submissive to their own husbands. Now let's just pause on verse 5. People who've often asked me, were the Old Testament believers, were they regenerate? Were they justified and regenerate? And verse 5 is actually one of the verses often used. That Peter calls New Covenant women to look at the Old Covenant women as examples of inner godliness. Mm-hmm. Well, that can't happen without regeneration.
Right.
So that's a tremendous text on that. As Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters you are, if you do good and are not afraid with any terror. I'm not sure what Peter completely means by that. That's one of those statements that, were the things going on at the time, maybe times of culturally danger, terror. We right now can feel fear over what's going on. Verse 7, husbands likewise, dwell with your wives with understanding. Pause. Who can understand a woman?
The Lord.
A godly husband. If we're told to do it, we can learn to do it. And if there's something you just can't understand, just say, Lord, help me. Giving honor to the wife. So we think about women should honor their husbands, that's true. But here, men should honor their wives as to the weaker vessel. And being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered. So Christian men, if they don't dwell with their wives in an understanding way, give her honor, and lovingly understand women are constitutionally weaker than men in some ways. If we don't honor that, then our prayers can be hindered. If we don't treat our wife right, our prayers will be hindered. Finally, all of you be of one mind, having compassion for one another. Love as brothers. That means love as Christians should love. Be tender-hearted. Be courteous. Not returning evil for evil, or returning reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, blessing, knowing that you were called to this, that you may inherit a blessing. For, I love this verse, think about what this means. This is the will of God. He who would love life and see good days. It's proper for the Christian to love life. We don't love the world, we don't love the evil going on, but we should love life and desire to see good days. Let him refrain his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. Let him turn away from evil and do good. Let him seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open unto their prayers. But the face of the Lord is against them that do evil. And of course that verse 12 is a direct quote from the Old Testament. So we're going to jump around a little bit here on a few different topics. So we'll shift from one to the other. But I want to take up again a little follow-up on the issue of communication last night. If communication in our marriage is hard or challenging, if it's hard for one of us more than the other to do it well, set a goal to work at it. And you work at it by lovingly, properly expressing how you feel, how you view something. You practice that. You train yourself to do it. Like if you want to talk about something that's bothering you, or that they're doing that's bothering you, or something about the children, you start sharing, and your mate should hear you talk about it this way. Well, I just want to share with you how I see it, and I want to hear how you see it. This is how I see it, and then you share. I think this is what's happening. So I'll share what I think's happening, and then you can let me hear what you think. This is what I think about it, and this is how it makes me feel. Those are methods of communication that are easy to do. You just use the tools. And you share your perspective fully about what you need to communicate. And then the listener. We must discipline ourselves to listen and make sure we're hearing accurately what they said. And the story goes that there was a couple that went to dinner at some friends' houses, and on the way home, the man said, "You know, that was a great meal." And the wife said, "Yeah, really good." So the next day, over breakfast, she says, "So you don't really like my cooking as much as hers? You think she's a good cook and I'm not." "No, honey, that's not what you're a good cook. I wasn't saying that." "Sure, dear. I'm not really sure you love me." Well, husbands have to reaffirm, not grow impatient. But you see, he said one thing, she heard something else, probably out of insecurity. But sometimes at some level, don't you hear, ladies, hear your husband say something and then you make it about you? Well, are you implying that and husbands aren't trying to do that. They're just naively, simply making a comment. So here's what I'm trying to get to. Listening well is a learned art, and it's a disciplined art. So I want to mention about really 3 things that will let you know if you're a good listener. These would be good to jot down. This is a self-test on if you are a good listener. And these are the things you work on if you have weakness in these. How to know if you're a good listener. Number 1, do you interrupt the one speaking before they finish speaking? I've had a bad habit about this. Linda's seen me do it, and she'll always tell me, And I recognize it when others are doing it. And I've gone to brothers sometimes and I said, you know, you interrupted him several times when he was in full sentence. So do you interrupt people before they finish speaking? That means you're not really listening. What are you doing in that moment then? Tell me.
You're being selfish. You're just.
Well, yeah, but, huh?
Thinking about what we're going to say.
Exactly, that's my answer. And we are being selfish, but your mind goes to what you want to reply with. You got to discipline yourself to hear them out fully and don't interrupt. And don't start speaking until you know they're stopping. Number 2 relates to Kyle's answer. Do you miss what they're really saying because you're now thinking about what you'll say in response? If your mind starts going to what you're going to say, you're not going to hear what they're really saying. You're not going to fully hear it and certainly won't understand and appreciate it. Number 3, this is kind of a long question. You could paraphrase it however you want to. When they have communicated to you, did you understand them clearly so much that you could repeat back to them the essence of what they actually said? Did you understand them so clearly that you could repeat back to them the essence of what they said? Did you understand them so clearly that you could repeat back to them the essence of what they said? Which means, if you repeated back, they would be able to say, yeah, that is what I meant. Now, as husbands and wives, we practice that more in discussions when tension arrives or when we disagree. Back up and make sure we're understanding. Now, dear, here's kind of what I heard. Maybe I'm wrong. So, is this what you meant? That would tremendously help communication to go forward. So if you can't pass the test on those 3 things, it means you're not a good listener. You gotta improve. And last night, brother, you mentioned the word respect, mutual respect. Our husband or our wife is a human being made in God's image. They're a child of God. They deserve our respect just because they're a child of God. And how much more if they're our husband or our wife? Show respect. Now, I'm giving Cody a premarital questionnaire. He's going to have it to make copies. But I want to talk about a real simple thing, and there's 5 or 6 points under each one, and I want you to have them yourself. Well, really, they don't have to take notes on this. You can give a copy to everybody. But listen to these, and Linda and I don't always do this, but I know we can improve if we will. But this is a learned behavior. So communication method in marriage for times of conflict or disagreement. So the goal is here, one speaks about what's on the other's heart. No, One speaks about what's on their heart, and the other listens. All right? So for this to work, here's what the speaker has to do, and then I'll tell you second what the listener has to do. The speaker. So they're disagreeing over something. Cody starts sharing, and Casey's listening. Number one, the speaker must make sure they're speaking in love with a good attitude. Number two, provide a safe environment for the conversation and for them to listen. Don't do it in front of your children. Number three, the speaker must state the facts that you're basing your feelings on instead of making your feelings the facts. State the facts to them instead of making your feelings the facts. So this takes some work and practice. And then number four, ask the listener to summarize the meaning of your statements. Okay, Casey, that's what I see and feel and about this now. Tell me what you think I mean. Because you've got to hear clearly what I was actually saying. I wasn't saying I don't like your cooking. I was just saying that was a good meal. So Casey, tell me what you understand I was saying. And then finally, together you clarify the specific statements until you both have understood the communication to your satisfaction. So there, as the speaker speaks, the hearer is listening, seeking to understand, and then they clarify back to you what you were saying. All right, the listener, here's your job. And remember, this is for times of disagreement. All right, times of disagreement or conflict, if somebody's upset, we're not going to immediately say, oh, this is time to use Brother Mack's paper. You're not ready to talk yet. So get a break, diffuse. A couple hours later, say, hey, honey, we're sorry we had the conflict. So let's sit down and improve on it. Then you come together. All right, so for the listener, here's 6 things they should do. Number one, listen. Try to listen not from your perspective of how you're judging it. Try to listen from the speaker's perspective. I want to hear you're all ears. You're respecting them. You say, I want to hear what they're truly saying. I want to know their perspective. Again, number 2, don't be thinking about any reply. Only listen. And that takes mental discipline. Your time's coming to talk. Don't even mentally start preparing. Number 3, show respect by staying with their exact communication and don't get off track. Show respect by staying with their exact communication and don't get off track. Number 4, while you listen and when you respond back, don't complain or blame shift. Number 5, when you've heard them, restate the meaning of the message to their satisfaction. Casey, here's what I heard you say. Is this accurate? No, you kind of missed it there. Okay, say it again to me then. Or, yeah, that is what I meant. And that shows her that he's a good listener. So restate the meaning of the message to their satisfaction. Number 6, for the listener, gain wisdom, develop understanding, and use your communication to resolve issues, not to create alienation. Our communication has got to be mature, loving, respectful, And the goal is to resolve issues and not create alienation. All right, anybody have a question on that? You'll get these to take home. Questions, anybody?
I was asking now, about not using not saying that we're in a disagreement and go right to the method, but to step away for a time and diffuse the situation and get your, calm down or whatever you're going to do. What about those who have taken that passage in Ephesians 4:26 and made the application that you should never go to bed with your spouse with any sort of anger or any sort of, because sometimes you're arguing, you're doing this, it gets late, it makes no sense to continue to do it. It makes sense to just go to bed, diffuse it before we continue to try to have this communication. I mean, what would you, I've always felt like that was an overreach.
It may be
in application.
An overreach. Each of us as couples, we have to know our marriage. We have to know, like, it's not going to work at 10 o'clock at night if Lynn and I have a serious, heavy conversation where we disagree. Bedtime is not probably the time to have a conflict resolution discussion. But I think in general that means even if we had resolved the conflict and we had to go to the next day, don't go to bed bitter.
Right.
Go to bed saying, hey, we'll have to come back to this.
Right.
Forgive me for any way I was coming across wrong. I love you. Go to bed that way.
Yeah.
So, question? Any other questions?
Can I just make a comment on that verse? It doesn't say don't go to bed angry. It says don't let the sun go down.
Right.
And by 10 o'clock, the sun's already down.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I think you just need to go to bed because you've already missed that line.
And in the winter, it's 6 o'clock.
Right.
So.
Yeah. All right, let's shift gears a little bit. Let me just talk about marriage a little bit in general. Then we're going to some other practical things. Cody, why don't you watch the clock and tell me when I really need to stop? So, all right, marriage. In the original creation of man, God made two people out of one. But in marriage now, he makes one out of two. You come together in marriage, and we're one flesh in marriage. We're joint heirs together of the grace of life. In other words, a wife has as much access to the throne of grace, and the husband isn't the priest in terms of a mediator, but we are a priest over a household to lead in the worship of God and be a spiritual leader. But marriage is one bond, one flesh forever, and ultimately what it becomes in each of our lives, marriage is a piece of heavenly sandpaper in our lives. It starts changing us in ways that just reading the Bible or listening to sermons or praying won't change you. It's experiential. So marriage really is a perpetual test of personal character. Because what rubs you comes out of you. They'd say about John Bunyan, you could stick him with a pin or a needle anywhere and he'd bleed the Bible. He was so full of it. When people irritate you, what comes out?
Right.
Irritation or kindness back. So marriage is more than, somebody said, it's more than finding the right person. It becomes being the right person. Because your husband or your wife needs you to be godly. Your words your responses, how you relate to them, directly affects them with encouragement or with woundedness. And women are very sensitive to how their husband treats them, positively or negatively. But ladies, husbands wound easily too. If you have a habit of harsh words, gripey words, where you come across weakly that they're just not doing what they're not pleasing you, they're gonna be wounded inside. They may never say it, and they will feel defeated in marriage and in their manhood. So, in a few minutes, later today, I don't know when, I'm going to talk about husbands very directly, more than wives. Because, as I said last night, I think as the husband goes, so goes the marriage. And it's on us. You know, it's like one of my young friends that I disciple is one of the coaches for the Seattle Mariners. He's over their whole farm system in Dominican Republic. He lives in Denton. And, you know, they have, in that system, they have 14-year-olds through 18-year-olds. And I guarantee you those guys, they want to make it to the major leagues. And they will hang on every word he has. They'll do everything he says, except the dysfunctional and the rebellious. And then they get kicked out. But so, guys, we have to approach being the best husband and the best marriage the way those guys in that farm system do about baseball. You know, the pro athletes, they worship the sport. They eat it and drink it and live it and dream it, and they work at it every waking hour. And that's why a lot of them are as good as they are. In one real sense, as men, that's what we have to be about Christ first, and that's what we have to be about our wives.
Right. Yeah.
It's not a casual deal. It's not a part-time deal. It's not a minor league deal. It's the pros. So, marriage. Before man had any other calling, he was called to be a husband. So let's just talk generally some things about marriage from God's perspective. You know, we could read Ephesians 5, 31 and 32, but we won't go back there. You know it. Marriage is not a contract. It's a relationship that is a covenant. Covenant before God. And, you know, it's a mystery also. Because Paul said in Ephesians 5, you know, I speak this mystery, but I'm speaking about Christ and the church. And he uses marriage as a physical illustration of the relationship that Christ has with his bride. The Lord Jesus Christ, from all eternity, God decreed for the Son to have a bride. That was the original decree in eternity. The Son of God's going to have a bride. Some people would wish I would disappear from the pulpit permanently. So, this means from eternity past, God has had marriage on his mind. A redemptive marriage. And then he's going to create marriage in time and in space, not just for man's pleasure, not just for procreation, but to give a human illustration of what Christ and his bride is to look like. Your marriage and mine is to reflect the love of God and how God treats his bride. Christ treats his bride. There was a bride for his Son, decreed in eternity. There was a bride for Adam. And There's a bride for most men, because it's not good for man to be alone. He who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor. That's amazing. You get favor you didn't have when you were single by finding a good wife. The first earthly institution, the first institution in the entire universe was marriage. God created the most intimate human relationship, marriage, to speak of the intimacy between Christ and the church. So, guys, here's our standard. Imitate Jesus Christ as husbands. We won't do it perfectly, but we are to do it, we're to grow in it. People ought to be able to say, Mack really endeavors to treat Linda the way Jesus treats his bride. Not selfishly, caring, providing, watching over. Marriage is a relational union, just like salvation is a relational union. Our marriages declare something to others about God. So, another way of saying that would be, your marriage exists to preach the gospel to others. All marriages, your marriage and mine, have an audience all the time. All the time. There's an audience looking at our marriage. To whom does your marriage give an audience? Well, first of all, God. God is a person, and He feels things personally. And He gave you to one another. And He's the audience of how is this man, my son, treating this daughter of mine that I gave to him. He's watching. It's real. And He's serious about it. And He's lovingly serious about it. We don't keep in mind enough that my Heavenly Father is the one primarily observing my marriage. He's the first audience. The second audience is the angels. They observe the things of the church. We have angels that probably care for us a lot more than we realize. The angels are persons, and they're around us all the time. They are observing your marriage. And those angels you will be with in heaven. Probably get to meet them. You won't be scared of them then. But the angels are an audience. And they don't have marriage. They're not married or given in marriage. They look into these mysteries of the gospel and marriage with great awe and wonder. They behold our marriages. So, the Lord and the angels are our first two audiences. And they watch and they rejoice if our marriage reflects Christ or not. And they probably grieve if our marriage is regularly a place of dysfunction, arguing, bad words. Well, then who's the next audience? Who do you think the next audience would be? Children, exactly right. It's our children. So I want you to, and I'm telling you, this starts from the time they're very young. Answer this question. What is your marriage telling your children? Do they see you bicker in front of them? Do they hear you have arguments? Our words affect them, even when they're babies. And then, they get 1 and 1.5 and 2. They cognitively start connecting the dots. And they put 2 and 2 together, and they see, they'll feel fear if they hear anger. They'll get confused if they see unloving things or hear unloving things. They absorb our attitudes. Now, you know, those of you with young children, in the home, when it's just the Lord and your family, how often are your children hearing disagreements and arguing? They hear the way we talk to one another. They watch how we respond. And, you know, when they get 4, they're really thinking almost like a little adult already. I'm telling you, they are putting logic together. My youngest grandchildren, man, they can make statements and questions that are just adult level. And they are hearing you and watching you, and they are like a little sponge. They're soaking up any negative thing that you're doing toward each other. And you want to talk about good parenting? I don't care how great you homeschool. I don't care how great your talk is. If you're having that negative stuff in front of them, they're seeing that they're hearing, you're nullifying any godly witness you want to have toward them. They know if we're living the truth that we profess and what we try to teach them. They know if we're living it or not. And boy, you get 6, 7, 8-year-old, and it multiplies. You get 11-year-old. Couples that don't have this down well, when their children get into being teen years, they're going to be confused. They have this set in stone. My parents don't really live it. They act one way at church, but I see and know how they are at home, and it will cause them to turn away from the faith. So you tell me, you think parenting children is hard when they're young? Just get 4 teenagers, 2 teenagers, 6 teenagers, and you're not on the same page, and you're not loving and consistent in your home. Good luck with that. It ain't gonna work. Parenting gets harder the older they get. Our children are the foremost audience that sees our marriage in this world. And then the next audience is an unbelieving world. Your neighbors observe at times how you treat each other. Like the story last night about the parking lot where the couple pulls up. They thought they were having a private conversation. They were being observed. And Casey and Cody went away knowing what their marriage is like in private. Forget how they are leaving the service. And they gave a glimpse. The unbelieving world, our unbelieving family members, extended family, parents, in-laws, siblings that are grown, nieces and nephews. At family gatherings, they know we're professing Christians. They're looking. They're looking for something to criticize. They're looking to see if you trip up and blow it so they can soothe their conscience.
Right.
Your marriage is under the microscope of extended family all the time. You know, co-workers, they'll make rude jokes about their husband or wife, critical jokes, or they'll make vile jokes about marriage or something. In the workplace, do they see us absolutely different and not entering in? So, the Lord, the angels, our children, extended family, we must model Christian marriage. And just like wives will preach a loud sermon to the conscience of their husband by their conduct, we hope that some will desire the gospel as a result of how we live as couples. The message that our marriage preaches either grieves or pleases the Lord. It either attracts or repels our children and unbelievers. So just to pause here, when you take real inventory, and it takes time to think and discuss together, what is our marriage declaring first to the Lord, then to our children? Just start there. And I just tell you, it's so hard. Whatever you have to do to clean up the marriage example at home, do it. Right. Make it a priority. Because your children are being affected every day, either with the good example or ill affected with a poor example. All right. Now, let me give you some questions to discuss later at home this week, into next week. Number one, the husbands. As a husband, what do you think benefits and strengthens your marriage? Be specific. As a husband, what do you think benefits and strengthens your marriage? Now that can mean, what am I doing that needs to improve? What could my wife do to improve her marriage? What, as a husband, do you think benefits and strengthens your marriage? Be specific. Number two, what do you need your wife or husband to be more to you? Be specific. Guys, I don't want you to have 2 points, and ladies, you have 35. But just be specific and even be brief. What do you need your wife or husband to be more in your marriage? And then I want you to sometime express to your mate those specific things. Number three. Again, this could be a couple of things. Work on things one at a time. From your perspective, what hurts or what is hurting or damaging your marriage? What is hurting or damaging your marriage right now, mid-January 2021? What is hurting or damaging your marriage? Because if you don't recognize the enemy, you can't kill the enemy. Number four, do you feel loved and accepted by your spouse? Do you feel loved and accepted by your spouse? But there's 3 more words on that question that fulfill the meaning of it. Do you feel loved and accepted by your spouse unconditionally or conditionally? This is critical. Because if a man is demanding and critical and he's a perfectionist, he's only going to be pleased with his wife when she does everything just right. Husbands the same way, wives toward husbands. Do you feel loved and accepted by your spouse unconditionally or conditionally? Now this is a big, transparent, honest question to discuss. And this is where one or the other might go into the defensive mode. I don't think I do that. I'm not that way, honey. No, remember, just listen. So here's a follow-up example. Does he or she relate to you based on your performance? There's a gospel application. Does Jesus Christ love you based on your performance? What's the obvious answer? No. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loves the church. So let me just fill in a little more meat on that one. If your spouse does well and is pleasing you, then you're loving and nice to them. If they displease you or fail to meet your expectations, then for a little while, they're out of your good graces. A little bit in the doghouse. Maybe for an afternoon, a couple hours. Cold shoulder. Honey, what's wrong? Nothing. So, do you put one another in the doghouse because they're not measuring up? Then you're hurting your marriage. We have to love each other and accept one another unconditionally. And this is so important. All right, question 5. Y'all have 4, right? Here's 5. What are 2 behaviors that your spouse does that make you feel loved and respected? What are 2 behaviors that your spouse does that make you feel loved and respected? Communicate that with them later. This afternoon, tonight, this week, but communicate it. We could put this as 5B under 5. The same question that make you feel unloved or hurt. What are 2 behaviors that your spouse does that make you feel unloved or hurt? Number 6. Name 2 primary strengths of your marriage. Name 2 primary strengths in your marriage relationship. Number 7. Name 1 area specifically where you would like to see your marriage gain strength and grow. Name 1 area specifically where you would like to see your marriage gain strength and grow. Final question, number 8, will help you know if you really know your husband or wife pretty well. If you could only spend $10 on a date night, what would your spouse enjoy doing? Guys, let's don't spend it on the NFL. If you could only spend $10 on a date night, what would your spouse enjoy doing together? And then 8B, second part. Same question, what would you enjoy doing? And then I want y'all to share those with each other later. Right, Cody, how much time we have?
How much time does he need, bud?
Huh?
How much time does he need?
All right. Well, let's shift gears to talking about improving extended family relationships. Lynn and I have had this over these years. Extended family that are clearly lost, or professing Christians that probably aren't real ones. They're religious, they go to church. But, you know, they cuss and they're uncomfortable talking about Christ if they're around you. So, how does your marriage relate to extended family? And how have you allowed your extended family to affect your marriage and your home in a bad way? Let me illustrate this. There was a young couple who used to be in our church in Denton. They live in another part of Texas now. They came to me and they said, Mack, we need some real help with something. So I met with them a couple of times, and here was the scenario. The wife's parents live way down in South Texas, but the couple began to say how her mom, the couple in our church, the lady, her mom, was always trying to control everything. The family was legalistic and judgmental, and even a part of a Reformed church. But she would, if she saw that her grown married sons were wearing designer jeans, she would correct them that those are worldly, those are carnal. You only need to wear Levi's, or something like that. And she and the husband were always on the couple. Hey, you don't invite us enough. Hey, you don't come see us enough. At every level, the mom, mainly, and the dad sometimes, was putting pressure. You've got to do what we're telling you because you're supposed to honor your parents. See the manipulation there? And they were frustrated. They were on the defensive. They didn't know what to do. Now I want you to think for 30 seconds, what would you tell them to do? Cody's laughing because I'm afraid he'd tell them off. Well, here's what the Lord helped me to share as I thought about it. I met with them and I said, okay, look, you have a home and y'all are on the defensive because they're sending missiles and attacks all the time and you're on the defensive. You don't know what to do. You want to love them and honor them, and they did. But I said, you've got to take a break together and you've got to regroup. And I called his name. Brother, you've got to take the lead on this, even though it's her parents. And you have to get on the offensive. You have to move from defense to offense. How do you do that? I said, well, you either get with them in person, that's best. I said, get with them in person, the four of you, and lovingly affirm that, you know, we're thankful that you're our parents. We love you, and we do want to properly honor you, but you're violating our marriage. Just hear us out. Our marriage is our home. It's not yours anymore. Neither of us are under your authority. My wife's not under your authority anymore. So I'm giving some new ground rules that we ask you to respect. No more pressure ever on my wife, nagging her about things in her home. Don't put pressure on us that we're not coming enough. We will come when we can. Of course, they were having young children come. And don't complain to either one of us ever that you dislike something we're doing as a family. We expect these things to be, we asking you to respect us as a family, because these are boundaries and you can't cross them anymore. And basically that's what I told them to say. There was a couple other things. Suddenly they felt liberated because it gave them a game plan, and they did it, and they've been in control ever since. It's really helped them. Because suddenly the in-laws know, oh wow, we know what they're expecting us to do, and we know we can't cross those boundaries anymore. And it really liberated their marriage. So I want to talk about improving extended family relationships. How many of you don't have to answer out loud, have healthy extended family relationships where they respect your family and they don't try to intrude where they should? How many of you have extended family relationships that dislike your Christian faith and your position, and they'll regularly criticize it? How many of you have a mother-in-law or a mother that never seems to quite respect your marriage and is not satisfied with the way you're doing things, especially children? So let's just think about this a little bit. This is a big discussion for couples to have. Linda and I we've navigated this for over 40 years because we've always been, I don't know if you'd call it the black sheep. That wouldn't be the right word. We've kind of been on the outside where big extended family, they're loving to us on the surface and genuinely loving, but when we're not there and they're together, we know they've said things critically that they don't like, and sometimes it's gotten back to us. So all we've learned to do is love them and be with them and enjoy them. But if they say things, Linda, with her, let's say one of her older sisters, she'll have to take a stand when they're treading wrongly. And I'm the outsider that married into the family, even though a lot of them have known me since junior high school. And so we see it together rightly, and we know how to relate to them. But as young couples, if you don't get a control of this, if it's an adverse extended family, it's going to affect you. And you've got to be on the same page. So this begins to relate to things like this. What past family on either side. Remember, I didn't have family. I grew up an orphan with my cousin who raised me. So we really didn't have traditions. We didn't have a family life. She was a very loving, gracious lady who really became my mom. And she was Linda's third grade school teacher. And then when she couldn't live on her own, she lived with us till she died of dementia. And Linda was her caregiver, really, till hospice took over. So it's a very unique and special situation. But regarding your family history, think about this question and discuss it if you haven't ever. What past family history, both extended families, parents primarily, what family history, strongholds, sinful strongholds, worldly traditions, dysfunction did your grandparents or parents have that has seeped into your marriage and home? It's probably their son. Ladies, you can't be toward your husband the way your mom was toward your dad if it was bad. But you learned habits. You have memories. And many young Christian women, by default, without even realizing, they relate to their husbands the way they saw mom do. Husbands, you can't treat your wife the way your dad treated your mother if it was worldly and wrong. We have to be completely rewired and our minds renewed to patterning our marriages after Christ and the church, not the way mom and dad did it. We cannot afford to carry the old ways into our marriage. Their patterns can't be our patterns. Their bad habits can't be our bad habits. Remember the funny story? You probably heard it. That the husband, the wife was preparing Sunday lunch. She was cooking a roast. And he saw her cut 1/3 of the roast off the end. And it puzzled him. He said, "Honey, why do you do that?" She said, "Well, that's the way Mom did it." "Why did your mom do it that way?" "Well, that's the way grandmother did it." And then they found out grandmother had a small pan. She had to cut it off. But Mom continued. Now daughter's doing it. It's the way they did it. We can't do things the way they did it. Their patterns and bad habits can't be ours. How Mom treated Dad, how Dad treated Mom. Ladies, we got to have a clean break. This is part of leaving and cleaving. So, love your mom, love your dad, but don't be like them if they're not biblical Christians and spiritually minded people. You owe that to your children. You owe it to your marriage to begin a new, the sins of the fathers to future generations have to be broken. All right. Pause. Questions, anybody? Rudy, you heard all that. What's your 5 questions? Thanks for joining us, brother. Who's got a question?
You just explained it so well, brother. I don't have any
I
questions.
know, you're good to go. Anybody?